It could have been because you know what it could have been? It could have paralleled the first. We really want a little story on its own. Yeah. Parallel the beginning then. Parallel
Flying
the beginning
around,
where she's
exactly.
flying. Or you know what we could have
done?
Have
them both fly
Damon could have been flown with her.
Shit.
And she could have done Dracarys again.
Oh,
where she did.
Fuck.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right in the beginning, she has Dracarys and Damon flies through it. Damon could have done that for her. Damon could have said Dracarys, his dragon does the fire and she
Vhagar
rides through it.
Cries out. Yeah.
Yeah, as she dies and takes her final breath. That's a dragon rider's death.
That's how you do it.
I got chills. That was a really good idea. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Madison.
And I'm Alex, and welcome to the Writer's Room, where we analyze media in various forms and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we're talking about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 6, titled The Princess and the Queen.
Wow. So, something I really like is they do a recap at the beginning of all the episodes, and the first 5 episodes we shot really close together, and this one's been a while, so I really needed the recap.
Do you want to do a spoiler warning?
Yeah, so a quick spoiler warning before we get into it. Anything in the Game of Thrones universe that is Fire and Blood, the Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire series, as well as the show Game of Thrones, and everything up to episode 6 of House of the Dragon could be spoiled at any moment. You've been warned.
Okay, summary?
Yeah, super quick summary. It's been a while. Do you feel rusty?
No, I feel good.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
10 years have passed since the last episode, and we see older Rhaenyra giving birth to her third son. Immediately after, Alicent demands to see the baby, and Rhaenyra decides to bring him to Alicent herself. It becomes clear that this child does not resemble a traditional Targaryen, which Alicent is not pleased about. We meet Jacaerys and Lucerys, Rhaenyra's other 2 sons, plus Aegon and Aemond, Alicent's 2 boys, who have also grown older. Despite being obsessed with dragons, Aemond does not have one of his own. Alicent tries to push Viserys to see the speculated truth that Harwin Strong is the father of Rhaenyra's children, but Viserys will not believe this. Laena and Daemon are now married with 2 kids of their own and a third on the way. They're staying in Pentos, where Daemon is obsessed with reading about dragon lords of the past, while Laena wishes to return home. Back in King's Landing, the 4 boys are training with Criston Cole, while Sir Harwin intervenes. Criston taunts Harwin until he lashes out, attacking Criston. Rhaenyra overhears Lionel discussing this event with Harwin and learns that everyone knows the truth of parentage of her sons. At the small council meeting, Rhaenyra proposes that Jacaerys wed Helaena and that Aemon will have the pick of a dragon egg from one of their hatches. Alicent tells Viserys this is not an option, and Lionel Strong attempts to resign as hand of the king. Alicent is all for it, but Viserys outright refuses the resignation. Lionel asks to at least be able to escort Harwin to Harrenhal since he has been expelled from the City Watch. Alicent expresses to Larys Strong her wish to have her father back his hand. Larys takes it upon himself to instate some death row prisoners as his own assassins, while over in Pentos, Laena is unable to give birth and chooses to have Vhagar burn her instead of dying in childbirth. We see Larys' assassins burning Harwin and Lionel, plus Rhaenyra and her family arriving at Dragonstone, as Rhaenyra has decided this is the safest option. The episode ends with Larys telling Alicent that she is now able to bring her father back his hand. Although Alicent is appalled by his actions, Larys is sure she will reward him one day.
All right. 1 minute, 49 seconds.
I was thinking it was long. It was a lot in the episode.
It's a pretty dense episode. Yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Before we start about sort of the plot points of the episode, I want to talk about the title. So it's called The Princess and the Queen, which is kind of cool because that's a short story by George R.R. Martin.
Oh, cool.
And then he eventually went on to expand that short story and put it in Fire and Blood.
Interesting.
So I thought that was cool. The Rogue Prince is also a title, and that was another episode.
Were they about these original characters?
Yes, it was about
cool,
Alicent.
Cool.
The subtitle or the secondary title is called, it's literally The Princess and the Queen, or The Blacks and the Greens.
Oh,
is what the whole title is.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
Thought that was cool.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a good sort of reset because this is the first episode with the new cast.
Yes.
Everybody ages up, and I think that's sort of seeing the title on the screen in my mind solidified like, okay, this is going to be very much about Alicent and Rhaenyra story, which I think this episode was very much about the two of them. I agree. So it was a good sort of return to form that I thought.
I thought so too. Do you want to start at the beginning?
Yeah, let's go through it.
So we open with older Rhaenyra, who is giving birth. Obviously, we've switched actors to Emma Darcy, who I really love Emma Darcy. I think they're very, very talented. So even when I first saw this episode back like 2 years ago when it came out, I was really excited for Emma Darcy to take over the role of Rhaenyra. And it's this just long shot of Rhaenyra giving birth to her third son. And I mean, I thought it was a really cool introduction. It doesn't cut until Laenor, the character of Laenor, enters. And so I thought it was just a great way to showcase, like, this is our Rhaenyra now. We're not even going to look away from her face.
Yeah, I sort of wrote that down too. I said it was a fun way to show all the new faces because we meet a good chunk of people. We see older Rhaenyra, we see older Laenor, we see Alicent at the end of the scene. So we see in this one condensed scene, we see all the new faces. But I don't know how good the one shot worked as a tool.
Okay.
And I tried to reason why, because it was well done. I think it was choreographed well. They like walked through a crowd. They were on the stairs. And I think it came down to what the purpose of it was, right? Okay. And I think one shots are the most effective when they're doing one of two things. Either they are showing you exactly how one character in the world is, or they're showing you how the chaos of the entire world is.
Yeah, I agree.
And obviously they're trying to go for one person being Rhaenyra, right? Yes. You see her literally giving birth and it starts off really strong. But I don't think it focuses on her enough. Like, it's always panning over to something else, or it cuts to Laenor walking in, or when she's going to the queen, it does the super close up on the baby's umbilical cord being cut. And to me, that takes me out of feeling like I am Rhaenyra in that moment.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I thought it was pretty effective until Laenor enters and they're walking up the stairs. I didn't feel I just didn't feel like it was as necessary. I do think it was really cool. I thought the sound design was just kind of honestly gross. It was just like,
I would say the sound is good. I do think it was far too cinematic-y close, if that makes sense. Like, the camera was constantly right up and you had all the bokeh in the back, and I'm like, it looks too cinematic for me to feel like it's real in the moment. You know?
I guess that's true with like the gross sound design, and it looks like very beautiful.
Which I think carries over for the rest of the episode. Like, one thing I noticed is this camera will not stand still. Like, there are so many scenes of people walking corridors with tracking shots, and those are good and they keep it interesting. But to excess, it sort of takes away. And I feel like every time there was a static scene that relied on camera movement, and there's one I'll get into later that really, I think, does a bad job of this. I feel like it takes away from that one-shot scene. To me, every time something like that happened, I thought, you're doing this technique just to do the technique. You're not telling me anything more than I already know. Yeah,
I didn't mind. I thought it was a cool way to be like, this is our Rhaenyra. We're going to show who Rhaenyra is now and what type of person that this character is after it being 10 years. So I thought to start out with a one-shot, like, that was cool. I thought, I don't know why TV shows love to show umbilical cords being cut. I feel like that's always something. And I guess the point is, like, we're gritty and we're going to show you what birth is really like. So I thought that was, I guess that's what they were doing. I did think it was, part of the point is just showing how hard this is for Rhaenyra. Yeah. Because it's this build up. So when Alicent says, I want to see you, right? When someone comes in and says, Alicent is demanding to see,
was effective.
This build up and how, like, harsh it is in this and how gross it is makes it even more, like, rewarding in a negative sense. Even more, just the payoff is stronger when Rhaenyra decides to walk up those stairs by herself, you know?
And it's cool, like, the Sir whoever is like, if I can be of any assistance. And I'm like, dude, she's literally dripping blood. I'm like, just chill out. And she even says that. Like, I think it was very effective in establishing who Rhaenyra is. And I think throughout this episode, something I noticed a lot is I feel like this has been the most effective time jump where they immediately get into who these characters are. Like, by the end of this episode, I feel like I do know who Rhaenyra is. I know who Alicent is. After 10 years of not seeing them, like, they've grown and developed in a natural way.
Yeah. I agree.
And I thought that was done well.
That even if you didn't tell me 10 years had passed, yes, of course, there's different actors, but even just the way they were written showed that 10 years had passed.
And it sort of ended on a cliffhanger, right? Alicent comes out in the green dress, and it's this big, like, declaring war thing. And to cut to 10 years of that, like, political war happening, I think they sort of dropped us in the middle effectively, more effectively than they have before, I would say.
I agree with that as well. I think, so we get Rhaenyra, the afterbirth happens, and then Laenor walks in, and I actually thought they did a good job of showcasing who Laenor is as well throughout this whole episode. So he walks in and he says, was it terribly painful? Yeah. And I think I laughed because it's like,
Well, his delivery, he was just like genuinely curious. Like that was pretty funny.
And then Rhaenyra doesn't even want to take his arm. And then they go up the stairs, and that's also a one shot. All the way up until we get into Alicent's room. So I guess it was kind of nice seeing exactly how long it did take to walk up these stairs and all these watchful eyes.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the idea is good. I just feel like it didn't execute as much as they were thinking it would.
Okay.
And I do feel, like I said earlier, I feel like a lot of techniques are what they're leaning on.
Rather than just like storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah. I almost think that they needed to keep the one shot going even when they got into Alicent's room.
Yeah.
All the way up until, so like baby's born, Alicent wants to see it. That's what the one shot was. And it could have been baby's born, Alicent wants to see it, and Alicent seeing the baby. Yeah. And then I think it would have felt like a beginning, middle, end to this one shot.
Yeah.
Instead, it just was kind of like, oh, we're done.
Yeah, well, and they just did weird things throughout. Like if you start with Rhaenyra and end with Alicent, that's a great parallel. Right. That's great. But like you cut in the middle for Laenor, and I'm like, just pan the camera over for a second. What are you doing?
Or because if you're gonna do it once in this like 1-2 thing. So if the 1-2, we basically have 2 one shots back to back instead of one long one shot. And they don't try to hide that we're cutting to Laenor.
Yeah.
And so when I first saw it and it cuts with Laenor, and then I was like, oh, okay, so that's our cut. It cut to Alicent. Now we're going to do another one shot. Yeah. And it didn't do that. No. So it didn't feel like a full thought out idea, but it had so much potential, and I love a one shot. For sure.
And it wasn't bad by any means. I'm just, in terms of like, I feel like it's really popular to cold open on a one shot on shows that's now. True. So if you're going to do it, like you've got to do it, like make it different from the other one. Like being a one shot is not interesting enough anymore.
Yeah. And I think the actors are so freaking talented. Emma Darcy's amazing. I think that Olivia Cooke, who plays Alicent, I absolutely think a one shot of her would have been really, really cool. Yeah. Because she killed this character.
They're very commanding on screen. It is so much fun to watch both of them. Yeah. Not that the other actors didn't do a great job, but it is like seeing them as these different people. It's like, wow, I'm immediately ready to hear
and it kind of goes back to what you said, because the younger actors are playing the characters themselves are not fully developed, because teenagers aren't fully developed as people. And so I think it's really cool to see much more fully developed characters in this instance. So then we get to Alicent's room with they pass Sir Criston Cole on the way, which I just thought was funny. He's just,
it was a reveal. Right. Turnaround. Yeah.
And Alicent's there, and then Viserys enters. Viserys was really, really cute this entire episode. He was so proud of Rhaenyra.
Stole my heart, honestly.
Yeah, it was very, very cute.
And he looks terrible. Yeah. You know?
And I just think it was really clear, both the writing and the acting, that these two characters love each other, Viserys and Rhaenyra, and that Viserys is very, very proud of her. It was really, really cute.
And that reads double well, because we know at this point, Alicent is so natural with plotting and like trying to turn Viserys against Rhaenyra. So in my mind, like to have him just unbent in that way, like their bond is so strong. And that's a great thing that they didn't straight out tell. Like nobody was ever like, God, did you love your daughter so much? Like the actors just pulled it off.
Yes.
Through other things that they were saying. And I thought that was a really good character moment throughout the episode that they kept alluding to.
It was very much show instead of telling us. Yeah, that's such a good point. And that's why it was so effective. Yeah. And then we get them holding the baby. Alicent asks for a name, and Rhaenyra is about to say, well, we don't know. And Laenor goes Joffrey, which I didn't catch this.
I was really proud of this, because of the two of us, I am the worst with names. Yeah. I will never, I wasn't even saying Laenor's name right the last episode, I don't think. But I remember I turned over, I said, isn't Joffrey his dead ex-lover from the last episode? Which, remember, it's been like a few weeks since we've seen it. So yeah, that stuck with me.
I think it's been like a week.
Okay.
But still, that made me think a little bit. Maybe that was just me, but that made me realize, okay, this show is better binged. Absolutely.
I agree too. Because that's another character thing. Like that's the first sign of Laenor sort of being like, I'm kind of over it. You know, like I want to leave. I want to get out of here, which he explains later. And that's cool just to be like, yeah, I'm going to name him after my dead gay lover, you know? Yes. And you're just like, huh?
Who Alicent's like right-hand man killed.
Exactly. You know?
So I think I agree. I think it showed a lot of who those characters were and showed us this first sort of discontent between even Rhaenyra and Laenor.
Yeah.
And then Alicent said something snarky. She's like, odd name for a Valerian.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
That one, she came up to Laenor and said, maybe the next one will look like you.
I was keep trying.
Okay, she is going for it right now.
It was a good introduction to her character.
Yes.
Alicent says that sooner or later you might get one that looks like you. And then they end up leaving the room, and Rhaenyra's kind of mad that Laenor wants to name the baby Joffrey.
Yeah, this is where we get our first of many walking a corridor tracking shots.
Yeah, that's true. We do. I think this one was a good one, though.
It was fine by itself, but I think there's like 2 or 3 more of just 2 people walking. I think
agree.
The same corridor.
It is. Yeah, I did think Laenor very much seems kind of removed from the situation and the kids and everything. And I thought it just continues to show that. Rhaenyra ends up telling him only one of us is bleeding, which I thought was funny. And then it looks behind and we see the trail of blood. And I just thought that was effective.
Yeah, I think that was another just cool thing throughout the episode, because they're sort of butting heads, Rhaenyra and Alicent, and they're sort of both handling it in different ways. Alicent has like an outburst later where she's like, if my dad were here, he'd be on my side, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's fun to see like Rhaenyra is physically struggling, because like she's literally bleeding at the start of the episode. She's in the small council meeting and she like starts to like
leak
wet, and it's just like, I thought that was a cool visual representation of like her plan is sort of falling apart, and she is physically like just falling, I thought that was cool.
Well, I think it's just that in pregnancy, you are at such a weak point that you need someone else on your side to help you. And you always need someone sort of sticking up for you, because it's just so taxing on your body mentally and physically. And so I think it even more so showed how much Laenor was not invested.
Yes.
He didn't
both like as a family person and like in this political thing that's happening. Like she will be the queen and he does not care.
Exactly. Which we saw that in the episode before. So it's continuing his character. So we move on to the next scene where Harwin Strong is talking with Jacaerys and Lucerys. And they're talking about how they've chosen an egg for the new baby. And Harwin wants to hold the baby. I think this is the first time Rhaenyra smiles in the episode when she's looking at Harwin.
I think so too.
She might have smiled when she like saw the baby. But this is the first time that she looks like actually happy in the episode when she sees Harwin.
Yeah. I think this was one of many scenes this episode. That I feel was like a third of a scene.
I agree.
So many things happen where literally 2 characters say like a couple sentences and then they cut to something else and then they cut back later to basically the same conversation but in like a different place.
Something else that happens in this episode, which I think made it made the pacing feel off.
Yeah.
It made things feel a little bit weird. So we see it already here in this transition. So what happened is we have these kind of short scenes, and a lot of them follow someone from the scene before.
Yeah.
So we're cutting to a new scene with the same person. So we see Rhaenyra leaves Laenor behind in that scene. And then we cut to a scene with Harwin, the kids, and Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
And then the next scene has Jace and Luke from the scene before in the next scene. And then and I think they were trying.
It's very like chronological.
Yes. It doesn't make it feel like there's a flow to the story. It feels, I think it makes it feel choppy. And I do think they were doing it on purpose. If they weren't, I think that'd be really odd to me.
It just plays a little weird.
It does.
Because so many times, like it will literally be 1 minute of a scene and then they cut to something else. And I'm like, I get you're establishing this so something else can happen. But especially towards the end of the episode, it gets to like plot A happens for 1 minute. Plot B happens for a minute. Then we cut back to plot A. And I'm like, y'all, just keep it going. Just give me the scene.
And I think scenes where we have someone and we follow them into the next scene would work if it felt like it was from that person's perspective.
Yeah. I think it also like tanks the momentum a bit. Like when you have to reestablish a scene and reestablish the characters that are in the scene. Because, Yeah,
well, if a scene is 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it takes 30 seconds to establish where we are and the people and the relationships and what's specifically going on.
Exactly.
That's a fourth of the scene.
Yeah.
So I just think so much happened in this episode, but it was all so many small, tiny things. It was just odd to me.
Yeah, I agree.
So back to this scene. Again, it was just a really short scene. So Laenor leaves with the boys and leaves Harwin and Rhaenyra alone, basically, with the baby. And that was kind of it.
And I think it does highlight, like, I feel like all the actors on the show are doing quite a good job. I do feel it is an editing issue. I feel it's a script issue. Just the pacing is weird. It's cut weird. Because I do, like, even that scene, I felt like we haven't really met Sir Harwin a whole lot, but he did a good job. I believed him, you know, Laenor.
I liked him.
I actually feel like the actor playing Laenor gave this character a lot of depth this episode. Like, as somebody who is sort of on the way out, I want to leave and like be a warrior. At the same time, like, he does have love for these children and he has a relationship with Rhaenyra. And I feel like, again, without saying a whole lot, he really like made me believe this was a full character. You know? Which is cool because he's not even like in the main cast, I would really say, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. Something else, this whole episode kind of hinges on the idea that it's very clear those kids are not Laenor's kids.
Yeah.
In the book, it is a little bit more murky, and obviously that's because it's from like a maester's perspective.
Yeah,
so he's not going to
write slander.
Exactly. But also part of it is because there's Rhaenys in the books is like dark haired. She's part Baratheon, so she looks more Baratheon. So it's just a little bit more believable when you have other characters who are Targaryens and dark haired and riding dragons.
Yeah. And I brought that up during the episode because I was wondering if the Targaryen traits are like dominant or recessive based,
which they are recessive because that's part of why they inbreed. Basically, that's why there's incest, because they want to keep those traits. It's really interesting, actually. Part of, even when there's not dragons, they keep doing it. So partially they do it for the dragons because it keeps the blood, the like dragon blood running through the family. And you're not sort of, if someone bonds with a dragon and then if a woman bonds with a dragon and you marry her off, then that other family now has a dragon, and then they have a better chance of fighting you. So it's all about keeping the dragons sort of in the family as much as possible. It's really interesting. But,
so like Aegon and Aemond have that recessive trait because red hair is also a recessive
that would
trait,
be my guess. I would also just think that like genetics are just interesting and there's no true, right? It seems to follow.
I'm curious if that's ever happened before. Like, obviously this is like she is having children with another person, but have any Targaryens gotten together and have children that just don't look like Targaryens?
Well, I think the problem is that it's all of them, and Laenor and Rhaenyra both have light hair.
Yeah.
And Rhaenyra at least has light eyes. I don't think Laenor does.
Yeah.
But it's because the kids don't look necessarily like
Do
either of them.
Valyrians have purple eyes? Or is it just Targaryens?
No, I think it's Valyrians too. And that's part of why they keep the
look. They just want to keep the look.
Yeah, it makes them look otherworldly, right? Godlike and different, and it helps them to sort of feel like rulers when they are other. Yeah. You know, they're special.
Anyway.
Well, you just see how it's important to them to look like Targaryens.
I do think it's fun how everybody's almost like making fun of the fact that these kids are obviously not from these two. Like, even like later on, Daemon is like,
oh, does he look like a certain
And I thought that was just really funny because I do feel in the book it would be very like some claims were made, but like in the real life of the show, everyone's like, yeah, no, they're bastards. You know, I think that was fun. Also, those kids are adorable.
They were really cute.
Very,
I specifically think they were trying to make the blacks, the kids who are Rhaenyra's kids, cute, like specifically really cute, because you're supposed to root for Team Black. They're supposed to be the good guys. So I think they tried to make the kids cuter. I don't know. Sense. Not that the kids on Allison's kids are cute.
We're about to meet the other ones, and I think I didn't really remember these younger actors because they're not in the show very long. But they were also cute.
No, baby Aemon's cute.
Like gets it.
He does.
He was so fun to watch.
But we
can talk about that in the next scene, though.
Yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next scene. I mean, they made Aemond It's not that he's not cute. They made Jason Luke look very like young, boyish, sweet.
For sure.
And Aemond, whose character is a little bit
already
more
brooding.
Right.
Yeah.
And Aegon, who's supposed to be kind of an asshole. So it just was clear that they were trying to, I think, put the kids to feel how they're going to be as adult wise. I'm sure this was nearly, I feel like casting this would be so difficult.
Yeah. I think they did a good job.
I think so too.
Going on to the next scene. Yeah. We meet them in a really cool place. Like we get to see like a taming bonding of a dragon, which is super cool.
We're in the dragon pits.
Yeah. Which we've never really seen.
Not like this. No. Yeah. Yeah.
Like they've always been ruins or they've been talked about. Like that was just really cool to me. Like I thought that was very neat. And to see like the kids doing it, it was just a very cool perspective. I think this scene did a really good job of establishing who the kids were and their relationships with each other. Yeah. And the actors did a good job about it too. Like Aegon, very big personality, making jokes, pulling pranks. Like that's very cool. Like we already said, Aemond just brooding already. He's like, you know, I think it did really well. And the scene after this with Alicent and her daughter, again, like a little on the nose, but I'm like, okay, she's like the weird one who's like a seer or whatever. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So again, just in this quick scene, I feel like the characters are established well as they have been throughout this episode. Like I know Rhaenyra, I know Alicent. I feel like I kind of know these kids already.
Yeah. I also, again, I feel like the first time I saw this, I didn't get that.
Yes. Do you remember? Well, I barely knew their names at all. Yes. I thought everybody was just Aegon.
Yeah. You're just changing so many people. Yes. That it's kind of hard to latch on to things. So a rewatch of the show and a binge of the show, I think it makes it more entertaining for sure. Yes, I remember at this point being the first time around being pretty checked out because I was like, what is going on?
I remember literally in my mind being like, I don't know what's happening. I'll just ask Madison about it later.
And so this time it was a lot more fun because I was like, oh my gosh, that's Jace and his little dragon that they're right.
And they are doing subtle things, like character things that I just completely missed the first time. Yes. I was so confused with everyone's names. Yes.
And just who belonged to who and whose family was who. Yeah. So I thought something else, we get some more dragon names. We even get that the Maesters in this scene with the dragon pits, they're like taming Vermax, right? Vermax? Yeah, Vermax. And they kind of give one of the, I guess he's what would you call him? Just someone who works in the dragon pits? Dragon tamer? Helper. Oh, dragon helper.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
He says something about how Aegon already has taken a strong call over Sunfire. Yeah. Which is nice. And then we kill the goat and Jace is like, can I do it? Can I do it? And we learn that Aemond doesn't have a dragon yet. And the boys sort of play a prank on him. And he ends up going down to the dragon pit and sees another dragon, which I don't know what dragon that is. I don't think it was clear. I don't know if it's supposed to be clear. Okay, so then we go into the scene with Alicent and Helena's just playing with some bugs. Yep. Spewing some prophecy.
Bugs. I liked that Alicent was just not about it. She was like, God, I wish you were normal. You know, that was funny to me.
Well, I think Helena's her favorite, though.
Yeah, I do. I've heard things about that. I just thought it was funny. Like, she literally has her hand like this. She's like, you know, you're not supposed to know everything. Yeah. Which I thought was really cute. My favorite thing, again, really quick, I totally missed this the first time because I didn't know what was happening. But they're like, Aemond comes back in and we get to find out that he's not only done that, but he goes into those pits multiple times. Yes. Right? She's like, you need to quit doing that. And I'm like, okay, this guy's obsessed.
Yes. And she even says it. She says, your obsession with those beasts is too much or something like that, which I'm like, okay, that's great. I need to hear more of that, how Aemond's character is.
Which is cool.
And I thought it was paralleled with a couple scenes later, Lena literally says the same thing to Daemon.
Yeah, I thought that was really good because they are sort of established as
parallels to each other. Yeah,
but I also like at the beginning, like we see Aegon, he's literally yawning at this dragon thing. Like he could care less. Yeah, and to see Aemon totally different, I think was a really good way to like separate them as characters. But what's the girl's name again? Helena. Just very casually says, she's like, you will get a dragon. And she goes, you'll lose an eye. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, she says he'll have to close an eye.
Yeah.
There was some other things she said, which that one I thought was really fun foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit obvious that like, oh, okay.
It was fun. It was just really quick. I can imagine if I wasn't so confused the first time being like, what? The first, you know, and then being like, oh, later on.
Yes.
Spoilers.
But I do. Yeah, wait. Sorry, everyone. Spoilers for the next episode. But I think I'm trying to decide. I feel like it was a little on the nose of like her with her bug and being like, future, right?
I feel like that's the big thing because she's supposed to be like a seer, right? Like she has visions, she can see the future.
Yeah, I don't think that's in the books though.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it too.
I just feel like they wrote it the most like I don't know, the most Westerosi like pick me girl, I guess.
Okay.
You know, like if you're thinking like, oh, what's like a weird future Oh yeah, let's have her like play with bugs and just talk to herself like this all the time.
Giving
2015
Tumblr.
Exactly. Yeah. Which isn't necessarily bad, but I feel like it's kind of surface level.
Sure. You know? Yeah, I agree. I think, and some of them I kind of don't. She said it has eyes but can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said it's beyond your understanding to Alicent.
Mm-hmm.
And she says the last ring has no legs at all. Just some of them, I was like, what do those mean?
I don't know. Maybe it's going to be like the fortification of a tower or something. Or maybe somebody's going to be like, this is your last leg, Alicent.
Wow. But see what I'm saying? I just feel like, I guess they were just trying to let you in on like, hey, this is foreshadowing.
Yeah. Watch out.
So then we get to the next scene where Alicent brings sort of the events of them, the prank with the pig and it being the pink dread, she brings that to Viserys, who's obviously he's working on his model again.
Yeah.
And she calls them savages and blames it on Rhaenyra's kids.
Yeah.
And Viserys kind of sees it how
clutch.
Yeah, he does.
He's like, are you sure it wasn't Aegon?
Which he's right.
Awesome.
It is. Obviously it is. So I think that's funny that he clearly was.
Yeah, I can't get over how much I love Viserys in the show. Because it is having someone so pure, not only be in King's Landing, but be the king is hilarious to me. Like, they're literally killing each other. And he's like, oh, they're going to grow up and have such strong bonds together. Knocking each other down, picking each other up, you know, playing pranks on each other.
Yeah.
That's so funny to me.
So I have a couple thoughts. First, I think it's funny to me that Alicent is trying to make sure Viserys knows it was Rhaenyra's kids who did that. When later on in the scene, not in this scene, but in the episode, she literally says something like, you did this to Aegon.
Yeah,
like she knows it was Aegon.
Absolutely.
Clearly it was him.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just like planting these seeds. And it's funny to me because Rhaenyra seems to not want to leave because she's worried of what Alicent will do with her dad. And it just feels like he's not having any of it.
I know.
He's not believing in it at all.
Unmoved. And I think it's, again, that's purely correct for his character.
Yeah.
Like, how many times has he forgiven Daemon for doing unspeakable things? Because he's like, if anyone hears about family, it is him.
Yeah, I agree. And Alicent says, it's a wonder to me their eggs ever hatched. Viserys says, like, what? And she says, you know why?
Yeah.
And she calls it a disgrace. She's just very upset. I think it's sort of twofold why she's so upset. I think one, it's just plainly she does not like Rhaenyra. And I also think she's like very religious and sees it as a great sin and this and that.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to me. And then Viserys goes on to talk about this horse he had that was dark-haired and eventually turned to silver. And he basically says nature works in mysterious ways. And I mean, it is true that something crazy could happen like that.
Yeah. Well, then Alicent challenges it.
Yeah.
She's like, how did you know it was the silver thing? And which, like, to me, I was like, yeah, somebody definitely just lied to Viserys. And Viserys was like, oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And he actually gets a little angry and says, yeah, we're not going to talk about this anymore. And then Alicent, still upset, brings this information to Kristen Cole. We have another corridor tracking scene.
Yes.
And
which really showcases just how down bad Kristen is at this moment. And it is honestly hilarious. Like, he is so upset.
He
and
says,
I'm like, it's been 10 years, dude.
He says, a spider who stings and sucks her prey dry, talking about Rhaenyra. And then he calls her the C word.
It was crazy. It came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think probably what happened, my guess would be sort of like this hatred he had inside for himself.
Yeah.
It just sort of grew and he blames Rhaenyra. And so really this hatred for Rhaenyra is just him projecting his hatred of himself.
Yeah. And they talk about that a little in the after episode. Like Alicent finds Kristen where he's literally about to kill himself for all the sins he's committed. And then he's saved. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it just really speaks to deciding that Cole is actually going to be quite a weak character.
Yeah.
In the sense that he can never, like, he's always failing himself. He's never like succeeding. Because I do think they've established him as a good fighter. Like, I believe he is good in battle, but he is just so untrustworthy mentally. And I think that's a really cool way to take this character. And I can see where a lot of the hate comes from, but he has become much more interesting to me as a narrative device.
Well, I think it's because a lot of the other characters, they just are a little bit surface level. Not terribly so, but he just has so much depth to him.
Yeah.
Where you just can really see the motivation behind all of his actions. Like, yeah, it's been 10 years. And to me, that makes him even crazier.
Yeah. Well, and at least to this point, I feel like the writers are by no way making him out to be like justified. Like, he is just brooding alone and like, you should be like, that's not right.
Well, it's extra funny. So, spoilers, Alicent, this is like pretty big spoilers. Alicent eventually and Kristen Cole start having, this is after Viserys dies, right? And they start having an affair together.
Yeah.
And
which we asked each other, are they sleeping with each other now?
They weren't. They're not.
They weren't. But I do think that speaks again, like the tension in the scene and the chemistry between the two of them was quite good. Because I was like, oh my God, are they sleeping with each other right now?
Yeah. And I just think it's so, Alicent is such a freaking hypocrite.
Yes.
Which goes perfectly with sort of her religious nature. And she just, it's so funny to me that she's complaining about sort of Rhaenyra's sexual sins.
Yeah.
Whenever in just a little bit of time, her and Kristen are going to be, and literally because of their actions, this was another big spoiler, because of her actions, one of her grandkids literally dies. So I just think it's so funny to me that she's has so much hatred, and is so righteous.
Yeah.
And
it's good.
It is good. And then the scene ends with Alicent saying, like, honor and decency will prevail, and we'll hew to that and to each other. And it's just this scene.
That's the look. So she says that, and then they look at each other for like a hot second.
Yeah.
Then they turn away, and I'm like, you dog.
She says
you
to
absolute
each other.
dog.
We move to the next scene, and Aegon is literally masturbating out the window.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I mean, I remember that from seeing it the first time.
I do remember that. I think it was. I remember being like, okay, here we go. But now I'm like, you know what? Okay.
Yeah. Tell me who that character is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all these 28-second scenes, like anything I can grab is good. I think it was, I kept thinking like, what do you think he's thinking about? Because he's just looking out the window.
I think the people.
Just all the people. Like that's like getting off like in public is what he was doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the whole point is to show that this guy's like an asshole.
Yeah.
Like he's, that it's so funny that he is not like fit to be a king.
Yeah, I like that too, because it's easy to think like far ahead on what's going to happen. Because right now, like he doesn't really think about being the king, right? Because that's not like the succession, right? It's going to be Rhaenyra, then Jace is next, right? And then so on. And he even says that he's like, then I won't challenge the thing, you know. And I think it's funny because he's just like, yeah, he's just kind of like a prince who's an asshole and he doesn't need to be anything else.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about this episode is, so we see Rhaenyra's kids and we see Rhaenyra parenting her kids. We see Harwin wanting to parent her kids and like talking to them a lot. And we see Laenor involved with them too and sort of parenting them in a way.
Yeah.
We see Alicent talking to her kids a bit. She's mostly reprimanding them or kind of just like speaking with Helena. We never see Viserys speaking with his kids with Alicent's kids, basically.
Yeah, we see him like overseeing the sparring training, and
which
he's
is really
like,
cute.
don't they all love each other? You know?
Yeah, and so I wonder if he sort of feels more like they're his grandkids. Probably, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't. Then,
I mean, we see like Kristen interacting with them, but he's kind of doing.
Well, yeah, and Kristen's like a terrible influence. Yeah. So I just think that's interesting when you look at Viserys, who is such a sweet, kind character, well-meaning a lot of the time, and for his Aemond and Aegon to turn out so like shitty, right? You know what I mean?
Well, and that's like Alicent doing most of the job, because
I think so too.
Viserys even comes in to see his new grandson, Rhaenyra's child, right? And I feel like because he's had to come face to face with things that he didn't like before. I feel like deep down he probably does know that they're not like Rhaenyra and Laenor's kids, but I really don't think he cares.
I don't think he does either.
I think he just is happy and loves his daughter and loves his family, you know?
Yeah.
Which is adorable.
I agree. So I just think it's clear to me that I don't think he's been the primary parent when it comes to Aegon and Aemond, and Helena probably as well.
Yeah. And he has been with his like ailment, but I do think his marriage to Emma is what sort of ended like my children and things like that, you know?
That's a good point. Yes. Like this marriage to Alicent and these kids were for the realm.
Exactly.
In his mind, in quotes. So yeah, I would agree. So in this scene, Alicent wants to know who his idea of the pig is. And she sort of basically says, this is our family. We need to watch out for our family, really meaning Aemond. And she's like, how long will Jace and Lucerys be your playthings? Yeah. Which I thought was interesting. And she kind of like tells him how it is and basically says, wise up, understand what's happening. And this scene kind of, in a more aggressive way, it kind of mirrors some of the scenes she's had with Otto. Yeah. Where Otto is basically saying the same thing. I wonder if they've
ever talked about this before, because this seemed very like out of the blue for Aegon to hear, you know?
Yeah. Well, because he says, I won't be the challenge. And she says, you are the challenge.
Exactly. So that was a scene where I think it was done well. But in this, where you've already established 10 years of like her trying to fight and get power, I feel like this would have been an established, even slightly being like, we've talked about this, I think would have placed it a little better. But I think it did a good job. I think it's fun to see Alice interact with these kids, especially as they become more and more present in the series.
She also says everyone knows like in their hearts that one day you'll be king. Yeah. So,
which is crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy for her to say it. And
so that made me feel like, okay, they probably discussed this at some point, but you know.
Yeah. He probably I don't think responsibility is his thing.
For sure. Yeah.
So to him, it doesn't really matter. And so then we move on to Daemon and Laena flying. Daemon's on his dragon and Laena is on Vhagar. So we see Vhagar for the first time.
Vhagar. I think the flying looked really, really good.
I think so too. It's cool.
Only thing that was weird, anytime they do a close-up of the saddle shots, it's weird to me. And I think it's something to do with like the machine they ride on. Yeah. Like it doesn't match up with the dragons quite right, but like distance, I think the dragons look great.
I think so too.
There was some really fun sound design where Vhagar like flew over the crowd and there was like a rumble, and then what's Daemon's dragon's name? Syraxes flies over and it's like a much less pronounced sound.
Yeah, because he's much smaller.
Exactly, which is just really cool because like obviously you can see how big Vhagar is, but again, subconsciously, just there's so much weight to this dragon compared to the other one. And I thought that was done really well.
So Daemon's dragon is like all spindly, whereas Vhagar is all like big. And I just think it was fun seeing both of them be really like all about this sort of Valyrian riding through. I just think that is someone Daemon would want to be married to. Yeah. His dragon is nicknamed the Bloodworm.
Okay, that
makes sense. Because
it's
like all spindly and like a worm, and it's like
it's red,
sort of like a red orangey color. So
cool, I like that.
Yeah, I think it's cool, and it just mirrors Daemon's personality. Yeah, sort of he's kind of like worms his way into things, and
for sure,
he doesn't really scheme, but in the moment he's So I just think it's kind of fun. And then we have, also maybe if you don't know who Vhagar is, I feel like maybe we should talk about.
Yeah, sure.
Vhagar is like super important. So Visenya the Conqueror, Aegon the Conqueror's sister wife, was the rider of Vhagar. So Vhagar is a dragon all the way from the conquering of
one of the 3 dragons that Aegon and his sisters conquered
all of Westeros with. Yeah. So it's a big deal. She's like the biggest dragon of
the oldest dragon.
Yes, of the ones that have been
introduced in the show
and who are tamed. There's like a wild dragon or 2 that is bigger, and we don't really know. I think the cannibal's bigger than Vhagar.
Oh, that's crazy.
We just don't know I don't think we know how old the cannibal is.
I see. Interesting.
It's really cool, the dragons. So then
this is a side note, I really like the design of Vhagar.
I do too.
She looks old.
She does.
And like just the jaw thing. It's just like, it's a very different dragon look. I feel like the second time around, I feel like the dragon designs are much more noticeable.
Yeah. I think maybe in the books, they seem to have personalities, like stronger personalities.
Which like they bond with their riders.
Yeah. I just think
makes sense.
It could have been cool to feel that.
Yes. No,
and I guess
work to be done, but it was a little better than I remembered.
Yeah, me too. Because you're not trying to be like, who's who? But yeah, Vhagar does look old, and I think that's really cool. Like Nana Vhagar, everyone calls her that.
For sure.
So Daemon and Laena which Laena, by the way, is the adult. She's now an adult, but she was who Viserys, the 12-year-old Viserys, was potentially going to marry.
Yes.
In like episode 2.
Yeah, Lord Corlys's daughter.
Yes, and Rhaenys' daughter. And her and Daemon are now married.
And I've got to say, Laena was my favorite character this episode.
Really?
I loved Laena. I think that actress did it so much.
Yeah, and it's crazy
sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's just crazy to have this character that we've had since episode 2. I don't think we saw her in the pilot, but since episode 2. And now this character has been here this whole time, but you as the actor only get this one episode.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting, sort of a difficult challenge, I think, for an actor.
Yeah. And I mean, we really don't know anything about her. And that's not anybody's fault. She just hasn't really been in the story. She was a child. Kid, and then she was at the wedding. So to see this, like, again, like you said, somebody Daemon would very much want to marry, this like very fiery passion. She loves dragon riding. She loves being a part of old Valyria. It's just really fun. And she's super fun to watch.
Yeah. So the two are having food they're in Pentos, and they're having food with some sort of lords of Pentos, and they toast Aegon the Conqueror, and basically they're offered residency there. And Laena kind of is like, no, I'm okay. I think we're good. And Daemon sort of shuts her down and says, we're going to think about this.
Yeah. Well, and they open on the dragon riding scene. So we don't find out till later that Daemon has just ran away on like a extended vacation.
Basically.
To get away from all his troubles that he usually causes, you know?
Yeah, that is funny. This was another scene that was like sort of a snippet of a scene, like not much happened.
Exactly. Well, it was interesting in the after episode. One of the writers talks about they wanted this to be all the Laena and Daemon scenes are like a short film that stood alone,
which is kind of cool, actually. I think it's an interesting concept.
I think in total it was like 6 minutes, you know?
Yeah, I think the idea didn't come to fruition because a short film needs a beginning, middle, and end.
Exactly.
And so the end is very clear. It ends with her death later in the episode.
And I do want to talk about that because I don't know quite how to feel about it.
Okay. I think the middle is somewhat clear. It's just like, so why are we starting here with them being given this opportunity and it ends with her death? Yeah. Because a short film, it doesn't really feel like it's a full beginning, middle, and end. Yeah. So I think that concept would have been great. I wish they would have actually done it though. Mm-hmm. So then we move on to a scene. Again, it's a scene where we had a scene with the person before and we're going to follow them into the next scene. Mm-hmm. So Daemon with his kids. Laena is upset that Daemon is considering the offer. Yeah. Oh, I do want to bring this. It is Daemon and his one kid because he likes the one who has a dragon. He likes Baela. And I thought that was a good character thing, too. Because later on, the other daughter is like, Dad doesn't like me. Yeah, that's and sad. All Laena can say is, yeah. You know? Because, I mean, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that Daemon's Targaryen heritage and, like, dragon is, like... For sure. Well, and I think it's, again, like, a good way to not tell. But, like, Daemon is the same guy. It's been 10 years. He has not changed. He is selfish. He likes what he likes. You know, he is married Laena because Laena has been what he wants thus far. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think he cares about her in some ways. Yeah. As much as someone so selfish can care about someone else. That's the thing. Like, I do believe they've had some nice moments, but he would turn on her drop of a hat. Yeah. If he wanted to, you know? I think so too. I think he cares about her, but yeah. I see what you mean. So the set was cool. I thought the books and the candles in the back were really nice. This is the scene, I'm pretty sure, where, he's just reading about dragons and these dragon riders. Yeah, teaching his daughter, you know, they're speaking Valyrian to each other. And Lena basically says like she wants her daughter born or she wants her child to be born and raised in Driftmark, and she wants to die a Dragon Rider's death, which is foreshadowing for sure for later in the episode. Damon sort of says nothing. And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I thought whenever you have these sort of switch between characters with Alicent and Rhaenyra, and then Viserys obviously is getting older because he's getting sicker. It's weird to me when you have characters like Daemon or Lionel Strong or Harwin that all look the exact same age. I feel like with a 10-year time jump, they should have done something, which I guess was his hair growing out. I guess it would be his hair growing out, but like he just looks the same age to me.
Yeah. And granted, like Viserys is getting like sick. But yeah, I was like, that's the same guy, you know?
So I think I wish they could have done something to make him look different or older in some way.
Or even like, I don't know, they've been in Essos for who knows how long, like tan him up a little bit.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
You know? It's so fun to watch in Game of Thrones, Dany's transition from this pasty Targaryen line to like just super tan body, you know?
Yeah.
And that's just like, it's a fun visual representation of her changing, you know?
And her hair, she wears her hair down and then she starts braiding it more and more. And so we just see, we see her character arc through her looks.
So, and when he grows his hair back out, I guess you can argue it's back to where this series started. So he's the same guy, but it is a little jarring when you really try to emphasize 10 years, you know, because everybody else has had some, even like, Lionel Strong, like his hair is thinning a little bit. I do think Larys probably looks about the same.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Yeah, it's because how old would Daemon be at this point?
So here's the thing. I have a lot of the ages in this show are so weird to me.
Okay.
I've thought about this a lot and I wanted to sit down and do the math, and I was like planning on doing that at some point. So it's a little bit different. In the books, Daemon at the start would be like literally like 28.
Okay.
So maybe they just needed to do something to make him look more young. Because Matt Smith is like 41, I think. Yeah. So it's just weird to me that they changed the women characters and didn't do anything different for the men at all. Yeah. And especially when in like Hollywood, there's a history of like women being really young and playing roles with older men. And I get that that's supposed to be these characters. But it's just also bananas to me that later on, so we keep time jumping. We time jump a lot. Like, what, like 10 more years, I think? Ish?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And Olivia Cook turned 30 this year. So that means when they were filming season 2, she was what, 29? Ish? Maybe even younger, depending on when they were filming it. And the actress who plays like the final version, the oldest version of Helena, is like 25. So she's playing this mom who is like 3 years older, 4 years older, whatever, 5, whatever. See what I mean? It's just like,
that's crazy.
The ages are crazy to me. And I get that they kind of had to do that for all the time jumps and ages, but it's just interesting.
It is interesting.
All that to be said, I feel like they could have done something to make Matt Smith look older. Okay, so then we're back in King's Landing. We have the boys are training with Kristen Cole, and Viserys and Lionel Strong are just watching. It's really cute because Viserys is like, this is good for the boys. They'll form a lifelong bond.
That's cute. I think this really solidified to me that I'm really excited to watch these kids in scenes.
Yeah.
Like, I just really enjoyed myself. Like, I like their characters. I like the idea of the story getting passed down to the next generation. That's very symbolic. And it was just fun. Like, it was fun to just see some like kind of like shitty kids be shitty, you know? And then like Jason, like they're really cute and it's just fun. Like, it's a totally different perspective.
It's like reminds me, they said after the episode, they would call this sort of the repilot of the series, which I think is cool. And in episode 1 of Game of Thrones, something so cool is you see all these kids. And it feels very much like you see the kids and you see the dragon eggs and you see the direwolf puppies. Yeah. And so it's just really cool because it feels like we are gonna go somewhere.
In a weird way, it kind of like is reminiscent of Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah, sure.
In this like dark, gritty world, in this episode where like the kids are just like goofing around and like playing pranks on each other and they spar a little bit, but it's still just kind of like kids, you know? I get what you're saying though. It's these like innocent characters who are like they have no idea what they're about to walk into.
Yeah.
As the story unfolds, and it's
cool.
just nice. Like it's good, and it's a good breakup of two adults walking and talking with each other.
Yeah, I agree. And so Aegon, there's a moment where he watches some of these handmaiden girls, and that's, if you remember, this is a spoiler for later. He's like, the way he treats some of these handmaiden girls is not very great later on, so that was just some foreshadowing there. Kristen Cole says, like, fight me to Aemond and Aegon. And he has
this scene is strike 2 for Kristen.
Yeah,
it
really is.
I wrote down Kristen is both a bad person and a bad teacher.
Yeah. I'm like, why is Rhaenyra letting Kristen Cole teach her kids? I know. Maybe that's just how it is.
I don't know. I feel like that could have been like an Alicent push. Like he's the King's Guard. He's the best around. He's got a, whatever. I get it. It's fine.
It comes up again later. It's important because Aemond is like a good swordsman.
Yeah.
And we even see, I think next episode, no, it's got to be 2 episodes because it's the oldest Aemon.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a badass swordsman, and Jason Lucerys are kind of like, oh. And so this was good good moment where I see how that happened, where someone should have intervened and helped Jason Lucerys. But basically they're fighting, and Harwin kind of is like, boys, keep your weapons up, and sort of reprimands Kristen Cole, saying, give them attention. And Kristen Cole's like, fine, Jacaerys, you spare with Aegon. 2 oldest boys, the oldest sons, can spare with each other.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, like, these are literal children, Kristen.
I know.
Like,
it's good. He's just like so messed up in this moment.
Yes.
It's really good. And again, like I feel like even this training session showcases like who these characters are, and I think again that's like good direction, but like the kids are really solidifying these characters for the actors who will eventually play them. Like you see it's Jason, who else is Renee?
Lucerys.
Okay, Jake and Luke. Jason, Luke, right? Yeah. Jay, like they just look so cute. Like at one point they're like, you're gonna spar, and he's like, okay, and he's all happy. Aemon's like brooding, obviously, and he's like calculated with his movements already. Aegon's like just going wild because he like doesn't care. Like it's just good, like to put their characteristics physically into their bodies as they fight. That's what's so crazy about this episode to me. Like there are some high highs and then some just boring lows.
I wrote down that I thought this was the best scene because, again, more than one thing is happening.
Exactly.
So that's what was missing in all these little tiny short scenes.
I literally have that written. I was going to say that.
See, there's just no layers to them. Only one thing is happening. We're sort of saying, and I can see like, okay, Alicent's upset.
It's so surface level. It's so surface level.
And this is the best scene in the episode, I would say. It's probably my favorite scene because it's the only scene that's playing at levels and layers. And 2 things are happening because then there's so much behind it of what they're doing and why they're doing this. And Jason, Aegon spar, and then they split them up. The 2 adult men split them up and are like sort of pep talking them and being like, you have got to basically get this. And it's because these 2 men clearly want to be fighting each other.
Exactly.
And it's really cool to see these adults using these children in a really honestly terrible way.
Yeah.
And for Viserys to be watching it and sort of just like oblivious to it and or willingly so even maybe.
Yeah. And the Hand watching his son, like that's a whole other level of, because he knows, everybody knows. Yeah. Viserys is choosing not to see, but everybody sees what's happening. And it's great. And
so the kids are fighting while we literally have 2 fights going on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot riding on it. And then eventually it sort of ends and Kristen Cole is like, this is odd to me. I feel like only someone who was a cousin to these boys or like a brother to these boys or a father to these boys would act that way. And of course, Kristen Cole got what he wanted and Harwin Strong ends up like jacking him.
Yeah, very well done. I feel like the show, a lot of the time, they feel like the complexity of what Game of Thrones is comes down to how many people are on the board. Sure, but I feel like this scene really encapsulates, it's not about how many people, it's about how many relationships overlap each other. You know?
Something else I'll say is, so you know how they talked about how Daemon and Lena scenes are supposed to feel like their own short story.
Yeah.
it's interesting to me because I would have said this scene feels like its own short story.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. This scene in itself has a beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And every scene needs to have that. That's why these like tiny snippet of scenes, they're all just beginnings.
Yeah, well, they love to say this in the after episode. Every scene felt like it was another domino being laid down to something else. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait till that means anything to me at all. You know? And then the episode ended.
Yeah, exactly. And so this scene was so good because it had this beginning, middle, and end. It had a clear climactic moment and there were actual stakes behind it.
Yeah.
And I think they need to apply that formula to the rest of their scenes. If you have a 1-minute scene, it's hard to put in a beginning, middle, and end to that scene and end somewhere different than where you started. And to me, that's just like sort of the basics of storytelling. So it's so weird when these people just aren't doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
And maybe you don't have to do it every single scene. And when you know the functions of storytelling so well and you decide to break those rules on purpose, it can create really amazing art as well. But it's so weird to me that they're sort of choosing to tell the story in such an odd way that I don't think is effective.
Yeah, there's just so many easy things they could do.
Yeah.
And they're just not, which I think is impacting. And I feel like even though this is the second time around we're binging it through, I feel like doing those things that seem like next level storytelling, that would make things clearer to understand the first time.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
You know? Like, I remember, and I wrote this down somewhere, the transitions between scenes are not as strong as I think they need to be, because something Game of Thrones did really well, again, to bring back to Game of Thrones, we don't see Dany touch Westeros until season 7. Mm-hmm. But I know her relationship with everybody there, because every time they got the chance, they would do a wicked, amazing cut from some line to be like, you're not a conqueror, boom, Dany. Yeah. Right? Or you're not who I'm afraid of. Boom, Dany. Right? Mm-hmm. So even though like she is literally not even in the story, but she is connected to everyone by the time she gets there. And I feel like they are really missing out on quick, effective transitions to show relationships.
Yeah.
And I noticed that because they've done it before. They've done good ones, especially with the last episode. They had some really nice transitions. And this one, again, just like a scene starts, another scene, you know?
And I think this next scene is a really good example of how it's like the pacing is picking up. We have this great scene and then it drops off because all we do is cut to Rhaenyra with her baby, and it's like nice to see sort of the after effects of birth and how her handmaiden's helping her with like the pain and treatment and stuff like that. And then she walks in on Harwin Strong and Lionel Strong discussing sort of the events. And it's just, again, it's this big lead up in that scene. And we end with Kristen Cole like smiling, like he won. And he's got blood on his face. It's a great way to beginning, middle, end that scene. And it's just so cool. And then we cut to a new scene and like it's like the momentum falls off, the ball was dropped.
Yeah.
And you got to pick it back up, and it's really difficult to do that. And I'm trying to think of maybe an example transition from this scene would be, even if it was just like Kristen Cole laughing into like Rhaenyra laughing, would still just be at her baby, you know, and we see her like blissfully unaware of all of this. Or
even like if you're going to do what you've been doing, following people, like follow the perspective of Sir Harwin.
Sure,
right?
Yes.
Where he's getting scolded by his father or something. And then we see Rhaenyra walk in. Yeah, it was really hard to write anything about this scene. It was boring. I said the dialogue throughout of clarifying who is who was good. Like they like very naturally, like, because we were asking like, oh my gosh, are they related?
Yeah.
And then he's like, my boy, my son, this and that. And I remembered earlier, like, just from naming the characters and saying things like that, I feel like the dialogue of expositing who is who was done pretty well.
I think so too. I always wish they could tell us earlier. I feel like I'm playing catch up sometimes even after seeing it.
Yeah.
I wish they would have started this scene out with him being like, with him
You're
saying
my
son.
It reflects on me. I'm the hand of the king.
I don't even think it's hard. Yeah. You know? So, well, again, it's just like, I don't get why we're not making these choices. So Rhaenyra's eavesdropping, which this is another kind of tactic they like to use sometimes, eavesdropping. And basically Lionel Strong is mad about what Harwin did with Kristen Cole. And he basically says he needs to be more careful, and that Harwin sort of denies that these children are his. He denies it. And Lionel says, everyone has eyes.
Yeah.
And he says, Viserys' flimsy shield alone is what keeps you alive.
Which is cool. Like,
I thought it was cool. I actually think the dialogue in this scene was strong.
mm-hmm.
And I think in general in the episode, the dialogue is strong as well. And I have some more thoughts on that, but I want to wait till we hear like more instances. I'll come back to it. But yeah, I really think this scene could have been better if we didn't start at a low and have to pick it back up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was nice to see Harwin Strong and Lionel Strong together because we've never seen them together and gotten to realize how close they're related. But it's weird to me because they look the same age. Right? Do you agree?
The same age, yeah.
So it was hard for me to like remember or notice that they are related because they look very much.
Well, I knew like they both have the same last name, but I was looking at you. I was like, oh, is he like his uncle or something? Like, what's happening? And maybe they said it before, but like again, we've seen it twice now. Like, if it's not obvious, I don't know if that's our fault.
Yeah, you know? I kind of hate when people say this. People will be like, your audience is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hate when people say that because it's like, no, like they're not. I don't know. If you rely on that.
I don't know. You've got to be selective, especially like we've already said, when 8 of your characters have the same name. Like, I feel like that's something you can sort of hold the audience's hand with a little bit.
Well, yeah, a little bit more than what you're doing. Okay, so here's the thing about these characters. This is what I mean by the ages on this show are so freaking weird.
Yeah.
So the actor who plays, which again, it's because of these time jumps, but then you got to do something to make him look older even more so. So the actor who plays Lionel Strong is 45. The actor who plays Harwin Strong is 35. So it's only a 10-year age gap. So they don't look to me like different enough to be father and son, which is why we're playing catch up on things. So I just think we needed to do something else to sort of age these characters or age Harwin down. And then, and that's kind of the scene though. It's sort of that. And I think the point was that Rhaenyra is just sort of realizing how bad her circumstances are was the point of that scene.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we do the same thing. We cut to Rhaenyra again. And I was wrong. Rhaenyra was just with her baby on that scene. And this is the scene where she's being given treatment for pain. And then Laenor comes in drunk, claiming that there's going to be a war in the Stepstones again. And he's hoping for adventure and battle. And this maybe could have been another scene for a strong transition because I do feel like we have this fight and it's amped up and then we kind of cut back down to Rhaenyra just, you know.
I thought, establishing Laenor's character again, I'll take it, any scene. It was a little obvious, but I feel like I can get behind it. Yeah, like he's been sort of living this life for 10 years and he's sort of throwing caution to the wind a little bit. It makes sense. It was fun. I'm going to hot take. I don't know if he was the best at acting drunk, You
think?
I don't know. I think it was a little too much. And maybe it's because, like, when you act drunk, they tell you, like, to act like you aren't drunk. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're hiding it. And maybe he just, like, decided not to hide it. It was just kind of weird. Like, it was weird because he was talking and then he, like, sobered up really quick to say a few things. And then he would, like, giggle a little bit. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a thought on this scene. So I think maybe what could have made it stronger is we should have just kept going with Rhaenyra. Why did we restart the scene? So we ended with, so why didn't we have Rhaenyra, oh my gosh, panicking a little bit. Everyone has eyes. Everyone who has eyes can see that this is not, I was in bliss, right? Thinking I was so naive and she walks in and she gives the baby away and is like panicking and Laenor walks in. Yeah. So now we use the momentum of the last scene to continue on the next scene. And I think we could have done that with Harwin, like you said before. And if these sort of jumps from scenes to scenes just kept with the same person, and we use that momentum to keep going. So if we saw Harwin Strong, the scene before, after his like amped up battle, he's got this adrenaline where he's fighting. He's like, I shouldn't have done that. And he runs into his dad, Lionel, because his dad's going to go cut him off and talk to him. And he's like, Viserys is going to cut you off from the City Watch. And that's how we learn about it. I just think use the momentum you established.
For sure. Because if you're not going to do where you cut to different characters related to each other, that's what you need to do. Like it's so jarring to go from the Harwin scene to cut to Rhaenyra walking in on Harwin. Like it's so bizarre.
So weird. It's just such a silly way to you're giving yourself such a difficult time in doing that.
Yeah, it establishes well. I wrote down a quote from the scene which I really like.
Okay, say it.
If you want to, do you have a quote for the end of the episode?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mine that I really liked, that if you didn't have one, this could be a contender, was "The wise sailor flees the storm as it gathers."
Yeah, that was cool. I think this scene was interesting. It was the only scene, right, where we've referenced it's been 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool that we didn't need it until this point.
I
Because
agree.
most of the other time jump episodes have been like, well, it's been 3 years and blah, blah, blah. And it's very like...
Which I do understand. Like, when you change the cast, I feel like there's, again, like the audience is stupid. Like, oh, time has passed.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't think it being 10 years is any magic number or anything. So it's good to like have it for the records, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
yeah,
think so,
establishing it like naturally is good. Like, I would believe he would say 10 years in that moment, and that's great.
Yes. And then Rhaenyra's mad that he wants to leave because she's just learned about these rumors, which I think is another reason.
He does not care about, which is so funny.
Well, it's also a reason why we could have used that last scene to propel us. But yeah, he clearly doesn't care. He even kind of like, he like takes his drinks and raises his eyebrows about the kids being his, about when she says it's his boys or something. He clearly is not even trying to pretend these are his kids, which I think is interesting. And Rhaenyra brings back the agreement they made, and she doesn't want to put her boys in danger, and she commands him to stay at her side. And so here's the thing. I wrote, what was the point of the scene? Tell me what if this scene was not in the episode? What did it tell me?
That's what I mean. I feel like this would have been the middle to end if the first scene of the two of them were joined together, right?
Yeah.
So we come in, we realize where they're at. He wants to leave. She's crumbling apart. Then it ends with, okay, if you're not going to be with me, like if you're not going to choose to be with me, you are commanded to be with me, right? Like that's a arc of a full scene that would have happened. Yeah. So yeah, when it's just the two of them not getting along and she's like, well, too bad. It's like, great, cool. You know?
So nothing really happened then. Nothing that needed to be said happened. I did enjoy the scene, but I just think I'm going to be more entertained when there's actual plot.
Yeah, for sure. When anything actually happens.
When it matters, you know? Crazy thought, right? When it matters to the plot, I'll care more about it. But so then we go to this next scene with Lena and her daughter, which tell me what the character's name is. What's that daughter's name?
Oh, I literally said Lena. I have it written down as Lena and daughter scene.
They didn't tell you.
I know Bale is the other one.
We know Bale is the other one.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that character's name.
Oh, well. I was also, did they say Allison's daughter's name in this episode?
Yes, because Rhaenyra says Helena. But here's the thing is like, when you have all these names that sound the same, just start the scene with the other characters saying their name.
Especially when these two daughters look identical at this point.
Right. Like they're they're just very similar in age. They're very similar hairstyles. So
and they haven't had scenes to be themselves.
Right.
Yet.
And we kind of got these ideas of who the boys were because they showed us who these characters were. They told us that one of these girls is a dragon rider and one of these girls isn't, but they didn't show us anything about their personalities.
And I can get behind them being used more as fodder for Daemon's character right now. Like it's very clear that Daemon only likes the one who's a dragon rider. Like he's spending time with that one. That's cool. I think we get some fun exposition about Vhagar. Yes. But yeah, besides that, again, it's like, why did this have to be by itself?
Yeah. So in case you're wondering, her name's Rhaena. Rhaena, Lena, Bela.
Yeah, Rhaena, Lena, Rhaenys, Vhagar. It's all
Rhaenyra, Rhaenys,
Rhaena. Yeah.
So yeah, so in this scene, I did think it's so funny to me that Daemon literally like ignores his daughter. Yeah, that's just like classic Daemon. Yeah. And we did learn about that Lena's writing Vhagar and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. It's just. At the minimum, we could have learned her name. She could have just said, Rhaena, what are you doing?
That's the thing. At this point, I wrote down the episode feels like a build-up episode so far. Like, everything is just like, oh, hopefully that pays off.
Well, and it just feels like it's for people who've read the books. Like, if I've read the books and I know, okay, Lena and Daemon have a daughter named Rhaena, and Rhaena didn't get her dragon until blah, blah, blah. See what I mean? Then I would have known that. So it just felt like...
Yeah. Another thing I noticed about this short film that is Lena and Daemon is All the location shots in Pentos, I just don't think look that good. Like they're dark, they're CG, and I was thinking we're in the middle of rewatching Game of Thrones right now. Like we are deep in the
Season
Westeros
7,
lore right now. Okay. And even when the show gets bad, my God, does it look beautiful.
It's like still looks gorgeous, yeah.
Open shots of fields and castles, and I know not all of it's real, but it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, it does.
And I don't know if they shot location for House of the Dragon, but it doesn't look like it a lot of the time.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And it's not to say that it's bad. Like it's rendered well. Like it looked like they were in a city. It just doesn't look like expansive to me, you know?
Or interesting.
That's the thing. Like there's a scene where Damon's leaning and it's just sort of like a dark sky and there are lights in the distance. And I'm like, this is Pentos. Well, I don't think we've ever been to Pentos.
We have. Well, not in this series.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. He could have been anywhere. He could have been like in a parking lot is what it looked like, right? Like literally. It was just, yeah, it just.
And it's just one of those, like, if you're going to spend so much time doing the perfect camera movements and rack focuses, like, have a fun background, you know? Like, make it 2 hours early so the sunset is beautiful, you know?
Yeah. So then we go to another scene that follows Laena. So we went from Laena to Laena, and we find out that Laenor has written them about his new child. And again, I wish we would have kept, maybe she could have gotten the letter in the last scene or something.
Yeah.
And like opened it in that moment. So then we could have used that momentum to continue on into the next scene. But then Daemon says something like, do they look oddly like they're the commander of the City Watch, which I thought was funny.
Which is funny that like even far away in Pentos, like everybody knows, which is cute. That was funny.
And Laena discusses how she misses home, and Daemon says basically he just misses the wine. And this is where she says he's been reading about Dragon Lords, which again feels very clear to his character. And she says sort of that she's not the wife he wanted, but he is more than this person that he is. Yeah,
which again, I feel like this is another scene where Laena kind of steals the show a little bit. Like I'm learning so much about her character in this, and it's cool to see the two of them because I feel like Laena is very much all of the best aspects of Daemon. Like she is very about her lore and heritage, but she uses that in a positive way. Like she's not going to run away from her issues. She's going to face them because that's like who they are as people. And
I do think he cares about her because whenever she says like, I'm not the wife that you maybe wanted in that way, he's like Laena, and he kind of seems like he's going to argue.
I do agree.
But I do think that again, this scene feels surface level.
It's surface level, and I don't really think anybody learns anything.
No.
Like they have a little chat, but it's like I feel like they still leave in the same place. Like Daemon has one more thing he's sort of contemplating with.
This exact dialogue could have happened in the scene before with the two of them.
Yeah.
And nothing would have needed to change. And so if you're not going to change locations to like a beautiful location, at least keep this dialogue in the scene where it does look cool with the candles and books, you know? Yeah. So then after this very short scene, again, we move into the small council meeting with Rhaenyra and Alicent. And I thought it was cool that Alicent is sort of just like openly talking a lot and sort of talking about how she thinks we should do this specific thing.
Yeah, I liked how this was like kind of a mess of a council meeting. Like somebody's deaf, like they're all talking about different things. They're like the stepstones, and they're like, the stepstones again. And that was just kind of funny. This is the scene I alluded to earlier. Every single shot was a panning rack focus of a person talking. And it was so unnecessary. And I think it really showed that the creators did not believe in the dialogue that was written.
Yeah.
You know? Because not a lot was being said. Like they were fighting. I do think what Rhaenyra says to Alicent, like they stand up and do the thing. Like I feel like that was done pretty well. But as they're like bickering amongst each other, like that's when the quick cuts need to happen. Like that's when you do the close up of this and that. But literally every shot was like a 3-inch pan focus. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm so taken out. Like this is a film set, you know?
Yeah, it's weird because it's like the filmmakers didn't have any trust in. I think it's odd to me because I actually think the dialogue of this episode is strong. So why'd they feel like they needed to do that,
I don't know? And it was at this point where all the things just start to compound. Like the one shot at the beginning, I'm like, okay, it was fun by itself, but like this, every other thing is on a dolly. This is all moving around. Like just y'all live with the scene. Just, it's cool. Chill out.
Especially because Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke are so talented together, and their chemistry, which they didn't do chemistry tests because they were casting during COVID.
Oh, wow.
So they didn't get to do chemistry tests. So they really lucked out with that, because I think these actors have amazing chemistry.
For sure. No, all the pieces are there. Like, you've got the talent to do it. And it's just crazy, especially in a small council meeting. Like, thinking of the iconic small council meetings that we've seen, like when Tyrion pulls the chair for Tywin's meeting. Like, I don't think it's a one shot or anything, but minimal cuts. I think it's a wide shot of Tyrion doing it, and then a shot of everybody else looking at him. And that's all you need. Well, I don't, like, you don't need to put a GoPro on the chair.
So here's the thing. Whenever you're doing any sort of like directing or cinematography or anything, even like theater and film, they kind of, with your editing and the way you want things to feel, you need to make the audience feel how you want them to feel.
Yeah.
And they're just not doing that. So like you said, when they start sort of disagreeing, quick cuts to make the audience feel on edge is a way to show that. Or, I mean, they do the sort of the opposite with that long shot in the beginning. If you just boil things down to the literal sense, which they know this is storytelling 101, right? It's not like it's something that's, so it's just weird to me that they're like the best of the best.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, I can understand, like, this is such a big property. Everybody thinks it's so dense and everything. Like, every story goes back to the fundamentals.
Yes. The basics.
It's always the basics, you know? And I feel like it is easy to get lost, especially on the shoulders of like the cataclysmic event that was Game of Thrones, both good and bad. It's very easy to sort of think it's bigger than it needs to be. Everything is the basics.
Yeah. So then in the scene, Rhaenyra and Alicent disagree, and Rhaenyra's like, okay, we're done with this. And Rhaenyra decides, like, she holds everyone off and she says, basically, pause, Alicent, I want to tell you I'm sorry for the strife between our two families. And Rhaenyra proposes that Jace and Helena will be wed, and that Rhaenyra will allow Aemon sort of his choice of eggs once there are eggs to have. And it's interesting because Rhaenyra is doing this because of the rumors that she's now learned of what's happening.
Which Alicent sort of alludes to later. She's like, Viserys, again, cutest old man. He's like, what a great proposal. I love my family. This is great. And he's like, wasn't that so nice? And she's like, she's doing it because she's desperate. And he's like, what?
Because I'm sure he'd love to see that. And he probably thinks that's a fantastic idea, because it is a good idea. It would really just bring the families together. It's a great idea, actually.
Well, and I'm thinking this whole time, like, oh, Rhaenyra's like having children and doing all the things she said she wouldn't do. And Viserys is just so happy that everything's working out.
And so then basically Rhaenyra starts, her breast milk starts going, and Alicent is like, Rhaenyra, and that sort of just ends it. And then Viserys and Alicent are walking away. And this kind of, again, a transition where we see the people from before. It's just the same thing.
I do think this one was probably one of the best.
Yes, I agree. This one was actually effective because we immediately started talking about what we were doing the last scene.
To them walking.
Yes, exactly.
It's very good.
The momentum from the scene carried to the next one.
Yeah.
And so really Viserys is all happy about this, and Alicent is kind of like, absolutely not. She says how sweetly the fox speaks when she's being cornered by the hounds.
Very poetic. I like that.
And I was about to talk about that, actually. And even in the scene before. So this whole episode, there's so much poetic dialogue, right? Think about when Kristen Cole talks about the spider and this exactly. We end the scene where she says, you may do as you wish when I'm cold in my grave. That dialogue in this scene is so poetic.
Everybody's got some good quotes this
and
episode.
I think they're doing that. I like it. I really enjoy it. I think it adds a cool layer to the story. And I think that actors are just so talented enough to be able to handle it where it doesn't really feel like it's crazy poetic. It feels pretty natural.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it kind of feels like zingers almost. You're kind of like, oh, whenever they speak those really poetic lines. Yeah. I like it. I can't remember if they continue doing that. I don't feel like they do.
I don't know.
But maybe I'm wrong. And I just think it's so interesting. I think it was a nice storytelling device that they haven't used before.
That mixed with just like sort of the relentlessness of Alicent. I said again, like really strong characterization after 10 years. Like she is a different person at this point, which is very fun.
She straight up says that basically that her daughter's not going to marry her plain featured sons.
Yeah. I really liked that.
Oh
I was
my
like, damn, that
gosh.
was harsh. It was good though.
And Viserys he thinks it's a great idea. And again, I have some thoughts on why Viserys is like this. I don't think optimist is the right word, but I think it goes back to this sort of belief in like the fantastical and this great dynasty of Targaryens, and that he feels like, well, of course, Targaryens are so great and amazing, right? And that these people are so wonderful, and the Valyrian civilization and he's got his 3D model, and that, of course, our two families will eventually work this out and become a great dynasty ourselves, right?
For sure.
He always is going to believe in this prophecy and this uniting of people and this greatness that they'll have. I don't think it's out of him just being straight up naive.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of his this grandeur, he thinks, right? Like this optimism. He believes in his people so much and his like blood of his people. So I don't think it's just him being naive. It's him being like fantastical. You know, I think it goes back to his character. It's a cool choice, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So then this is another successful moment where we have them in the corridor.
Into the room and it continues.
Right. So they're walking in the hallway and they walk into the room, and then Lionel Strong comes into the room as well. So,
which, again, I feel like this really emphasizes like changing location does not end a scene. And I feel like so many times they're just like, oh, we're in this place, and then the scene's over. And it's like, no, we just had 3 successful, like that is a scene, I feel. Because every time the conversation is built on and changed and added. And it was great. The pacing was great.
And we had all this build up from the small council carry over into the hallway, carry over into the next scene with Lionel Strong. So it made the Lionel Strong scene stronger because it felt more clear what Alicent was doing. So Lionel Strong basically says, I would like to resign. And Alicent is like, all for it, right? She's like, yep. You immediately see when he says that, she lights up. And I'm like, dang, Olivia Cook is so freaking talented.
And he goes something like, because of such and such. And she's like, he's going to say it right now, and I'm going to use it to my advantage.
It was very clear. You could absolutely see
it was good.
Alicent saw this chaos is a ladder moment, right? Like this idea of I can use this to my advantage to get what I want. Yeah. And you also see Viserys seeing what she's doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Which was interesting.
They didn't say this exactly, but I wrote this down too. The quote, a sailor flees the storm as it gathers. Yeah. Because Lionel says something in that same vein, which I thought was neat. Cool. So like a lot of the characters are like thinking the same. And I feel like there is a very big rift between the people who are playing the game and the people not playing the game. Yeah. And that's what this episode is kind of like focusing on, from the king all the way down to the children, right? Yeah. Like some of them are in it, some of them are not. And I think that's like just kind of fun. Yeah. So we learned that Harwin was expelled from the City Watch. And Lionel basically says that there's a shadow on my house, and Alicent says, yeah, speak that in plain language. Yeah. Well, yeah. Viserys is like, what shadow? And Alicent's like, yeah, what shadow? It must be spoken in plain language, which is another sort of like poetic way to say it, but it really, it hits when you have that heightened language. And Lionel just refuses to say it, and he says, please allow me to resign. And Alicent is about to be like, yes, I think you should, and Viserys shuts her down. Yeah. And he basically commands Lionel that, no, I'm refusing to let you do this. Yeah. And again, it's so many things built on top of each other. Like some of these characters don't know the same things that some of these other characters know. Some choose not to believe it. And all these multiple things have happened. Like that's what makes a complicated scene work. Well, and the audience is rooting for something. Yeah. I didn't want Lionel Strong to resign. And so I was like, Alicent, no, Alicent. Even though I like Alicent, I'm like, no, be quiet. Don't try to push this, right? Like, and I'm like, don't say it when he's talking about the shadow. Yeah. So when the audience is rooting for something, it just makes it stronger. And then Lionel's like, okay, well, can I just escort Harwin? Harrenhal, he's going to be Lord there now that he's not a member of the City's Watch. Yeah. And of course, he agrees to that and leaves. I thought this was cool because we get this contrast of Alicent and Viserys. They're just very contrasting characters in every scene, which is not how they were before. Before, they seemed to be more of a team, where Alicent would say something and Viserys would kind of be like, okay, yeah, like I see what you're saying. And since this realization
Viserys had in the last episode where, okay, Alicent was a pretty distraction for me. Remember how he realized that in the last episode?
Yeah.
Who she was, and how like convenient it was that she was there to bring me through my grief. And that's when he expels Otto. He has Otto, basically fires him. And it's just interesting to see how their dynamic has fully shifted. He's not here for anything she says.
Yeah.
Any type of scheming she tries to do, anytime she tries to, because before she could always get to him. Even when Otto couldn't, Alicent could pretty much change his opinion. Now it doesn't matter at all. He's really not for her. So I just think it's a really cool contrast, a change of characters. He's absolutely against scheming and she's scheming at every turn.
Yeah, it's good. And again, like 10 years, I feel like a difference has occurred, which is great.
And then again, if we're talking about a scene ending where it started, this scene started with Alicent helping him with his like sitting in the chair and he's coughing. And then he's like adjusting himself and feeling sick. And he says, do you want to help me? And she walks out. Leaves, She walks out. Fantastic. Why didn't we do that more? That's fantastic writing. We have an actual beginning, middle, and end to a scene. We have stakes and we end somewhere where we didn't start.
Yeah. So much has happened within one activity. It's very good.
Copy paste that formula to your other scenes and you would have had a great episode.
Yeah.
If this whole episode would have followed this idea, it would have been a great episode.
Well, and this is where I do feel this next scene, which is the Larys and Alicent scene. Yes, they're talking. I feel like this is where the chopping of the scenes made this episode fall apart for me.
Okay, yeah.
Because just like you said, that scene needed to happen throughout the whole thing. And we'll get into it as we talk about it.
What would have been crazy is if we would have just done a bunch of one shots the whole episode.
I've kind of been thinking that the whole time.
Because here's the thing, we do this again. We follow we follow Alicent after she walks out with Viserys into the scene where it could have felt like almost like a bottle episode. It could have felt like a ticking time bomb. We can't get out. Yeah. And eventually the end of the episode is Rhaenyra does get out. So maybe if this episode was just compiled of one shots, like if you're going to use a tactic like that, use the tactic.
Or if you're talking like the Daemon Lena short film, like every scene can be a character study.
Sure. Yeah.
You know? Like that's a really good point. I was sort of thinking the same thing. It's good to
No, we're on the same page.
Yeah. Well, I was like, this is stupid. But now that you said it, I'm like, oh,
no,
cool.
I think it could have been cool.
Yeah. Or at least the idea of like hyper focusing on a character at a time.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was Alicent's scene of the episode. Yes. And it was great. It worked super well. The pacing was great. She interacted with other characters, but it was about her. And I like that.
So if we started with like Rhaenyra's one shot and it's about her, and then we move to Rhaenyra interacts with Harwin, and now we move to Harwin's little snippet of his story.
Mm-hmm. And then you form it in a way where all of these things do happen chronologically, but it's way more fun and way more easy to comprehend.
Yes. And then the times where you can't go from Rhaenyra to Harwin to another character and sort of tie these ties in between scenes, that's where you use Lena and Daemon.
Exactly.
With an interesting transition.
Yes.
So if we have sort of Rhaenyra's beginning, middle, end of the story chronologically, then we have Harwin's beginning, middle, and end moment. And if we need to cut back to Rhaenyra, or then we have Kristen Cole's moment, which gets us to Alicent, which gets us to Viserys or something. See what I mean?
Yeah.
We could have done that, and that could have been really cool. And then we could have used the Lena and Daemon scenes as sort of transition moments.
That's exactly what I would have done.
I just think that would have been cool.
Very cool.
So then we get to the scene where Alicent and Larys are talking over dinner. And this one I do think kind of lost its momentum. It was a short scene. And we learn that Larys has just been a spy for Alicent. And Alicent is very upset because she wishes her dad were hanged. And I mean, I'd be upset too if I was being shut down by Viserys. And we have sort of, not like an Easter egg, but one of Alicent's handmaidens, Tyla, walks in. That's the showrunner's wife.
Oh, cool.
And then we get this scene where I think the only thing I liked about this scene was Olivia Cook's acting, because I love Olivia Cook.
Yeah.
But also Larys saying, well, Otto's not going to be impartial either.
I like that too, yeah.
And Alicent being like, well, he would have been partial to me, right?
I wrote that quote down too.
I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was just very human. Like, it's good because she's like, as much as Rhaenyra is losing, Alicent is also losing in a way. It was fine. This is, I'm not sure how to get into it, but this scene needed to happen earlier. Larys coming into the picture needed to happen earlier because there are a few other scenes throughout the rest of the episode that are Larys intensive.
Yeah.
And this is where the chopping, it just becomes way too fast paced. Like this happens, then a scene, then another Larys thing, then a scene, and then it ends with Larys. And it's just like, if this were gonna hit the way they wanted it to hit, like the ending, that needed to happen way earlier.
Or they could have done what we were saying, where it felt like we're near a section of the story into Harwin's, into, right? All the way from Alicent into now this is Larys's section of the story. And I think it could have felt cool. But no, I agree, because it was a bunch of short, choppy scenes. So basically there's that scene.
Yeah,
and
why don't we run through the rest of the scenes?
Yeah, so we have this scene. That's it, they're eating. And then we go to Larys seeing some prisoners. And he basically says, like, I'll offer you mercy, and you won't die if you do something for me. And then he cuts out their tongues.
And this one, I don't know. This one was really upsetting to me because I get it, like, where obviously something else is happening, but there was no clue in what he was doing, even though we just came from like a scene with him. So it was just him like talking to people. And again, I was like, that's 2 minutes that you just lost me at, you know?
Well, we had to fill in the blanks. So I think we needed something at the end of the episode the end of that scene with Alicent to transition. Yeah. So if he would have said, I'll take care of this. Exactly. Or something. That's all we needed. And then, or see him even just get an idea.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we're going with the big scene idea, right? You start off with Rhaenyra. You pass off to Alicent, right? Okay. During Alicent's POV sort of shots, you get the first meeting with Larys, right? It's from her perspective, but they're talking. So then by the end, when we get to Larys's point of view, they're at basically another meeting that's the same thing, but so much else has happened. And what they needed to do, so what happens, Larys reads into what Alicent is saying and understands that, oh, I need to kill my family. So that,
which was a stretch.
Yeah, so that Alicent can get her dad back in the hand of the king, which is great. That's fine. He goes to those prisoners, asks them to do like burn Harrenhal and burn Sir Harwin
and Lionel. Sorry,
Harwin. Yeah.
You're okay.
Then he comes back and tells her that he did this. She's like, oh my God, that's not what I meant. And he goes on this thing like, oh, I have to serve my queen. It's great, right? A couple things, like this is very chaos is a ladder Littlefinger speech. Yeah. Like this is for sure what's ending the episode.
So you're skipping to the end right now?
Yeah. Just I want to talk about the whole Larys thing because I feel like this was done poorly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel the meeting with Larys had to happen earlier. And then the ending thing is all one big after the fact scene. Like they're talking to each other and he's like, I did what you wanted. And she's like, what? And he's like, well, I did this. And then as he's narrating, they cut to him talking with the prisoners and cutting out the tongues. And then they cut to Harrenhal and doing the thing. Okay. Because that's what his thing is. He's the one who's like, this is my plan. This is how it worked. I used the chaos around me and found a way, and I'm going to keep doing that for you. And that's how it would hit. That's how I feel like they envisioned this scene going, and it just did not because it kept stopping.
And that's really a simple fix. It's just his monologue that he has at the end. We just add that prisoner section and the burning to, like, we add that little section where they're cutting out the tongues to the end.
You just click and drag that to the right.
Right. It's really easy.
Well, and it's so jarring because the Harrenhal thing's happening. You're seeing these dead bodies being dragged out, and then Larys just starts narrating. And I'm like, who are you talking to?
I agree.
We didn't come from a scene from you. You weren't talking with anybody. It's so bizarre. And like they cut back to that conversation, but it was awkward. It was done poorly. So that was the biggest thing for me. I felt, because I feel like I knew exactly what they were trying to do, and they just really dropped the ball with it because of the way they cut this episode.
I agree.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Not really about that. I really like Larys as a character.
I do too.
I think he's really fun to watch. I love that he's the whisper guy. I think the actor does a great job.
Something, while we're talking about Laris now, I know might talk about the end more, but I'll go ahead and say this.
Yeah.
His symbol is the bee, right?
Yeah.
And he had it on his cane, and he put it on the assassin's lapels, basically, the bee. And his whole thing about flowers is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool connection, like
I agree.
bee pollinating flowers. I just think that is nice imagery of his character, because even at the end with his monologue, he's like looking at the flowers. And
yeah, well, and it's this idea of it's helping both of them, but like the bee is extracting, right? Because at the end, it's not like, are you proud of me? It's like, I expect you'll reward me for this.
It's almost like planting seeds and plotting.
Yes.
So it's like pollinating these flowers and these things that will come to fruition.
Yeah.
But like the bee also stings,
yeah.
you know? So I think it's just really, it's cool imagery.
Yeah.
I liked it. It goes together. The flowers that he talked about when we first really met him.
Yes. The subtext of what's happening is great.
Yeah.
While I have remembered this now, the actual words he said in the monologue.
I liked them.
Okay.
Did you not?
I didn't not like them. I thought the words themselves are good. I thought the delivery of them were not the best. I thought it was kind of drawn out and slow. And I get that's like sort of the character. But again, like I'm not being accompanied by these visuals.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out what is happening, and by the time I do, we're in the other scene. It's just
I think the premise of the monologue is the problem. I think the words, we've had this whole episode of this poetic
very
dialogue.
Poetic, yeah.
Even like Lionel Strong was like, his flimsy shield is the only thing. Like everyone was speaking poetic dialogue this whole episode.
Yeah.
And I think it was really effective, but I think him going on this poetic speech with some sort of like really cool quotes that he said worked. It was just the premise of it was really weird to me because we haven't ever done that. This is the end of the 6 episodes. This like villain monologue. Like, you sly dog, you got me monologuing again, right? This Incredibles-esque monologue that he's going on.
Yeah. And I could take them on. Like, I do believe out of all the villains we've had, like, he's going to be the one to give this weird monologue. Yeah. But again, you just didn't set it up in the right way.
I agree. Because I'm like, who is he talking? The whole time I was like, who's talking?
Exactly. It was
For
so
a second,
jarring.
I thought it was Laenor, because when he first started talking, it cut to Laenor.
Yeah.
So I was like, why is Laenor
it's weird.
saying
It was
this?
really weird. But that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So he cuts the tongues out of these prisoners, and then we go to the next scene, which is Lena struggling to give birth, Daemon watching. The doctor we see Daemon in the same predicament Viserys was in, the same terrible choice that Viserys had to make. And it looked like Daemon was going to say no to this C-section, which I thought was cool. He seems to care. He seemed to be upset about it.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? Let me say what happened.
Sure.
So then Lena walks out and has Vhagar burn her. And Daemon looks like he's going to try to stop it. And do you want to say your thoughts about it first? You said you had
sure.
thoughts.
I just, again, I don't really know how to feel about this ending of the events. One, I feel like when they said in the after episode that they wanted this to be a stand on its own short film about these two, I just kept thinking, but you're so clearly paralleling everything.
To Viserys?
Sort of, just to a lot of different things. So like Lena we're ending with a birth scene in this, and we're starting with Rhaenyra's birth scene, right? So that's a parallel, especially because we know that Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship, like playing in both in the past and going into the future.
You're saying that Lena and Daemon's story very much parallels the story going on at King's Landing.
Well, I think certain events are being paralleled.
I do agree.
You know, like the birthing thing was very obvious. The choice that Daemon has to make of the C-section or not, like, again, that's Viserys'
You're clearly supposed to be thinking that, yeah.
And then we cut, there was a cut earlier on where they go from Rhaenyra, I think it was Rhaenyra and Laenor, and I think it was the one, let me double check, because it was the quote I wrote down. It was
about the sea.
Yeah, a wise sailor flees the storm as it gathers. We cut to Daemon looking out in Essos, right? So he's this idea of Rhaenyra's getting up and going, while Damon is eventually coming back. Like, it's just all these parallels. And I'm like, for trying to make this standalone, like, this is really baked into the episode.
I agree.
Right? Which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but I feel like if they would have had that in mind, it could have hit a little harder.
It feels like they didn't pick a lane. You either needed to be incredibly isolated from itself.
Yeah.
Or from the rest of the episode, or it did need to parallel it, and you have these weird transitions. And this is a spoiler. Damon and Rhaenyra eventually do end up together. And so maybe we could have felt like we were from these two perspectives where they both feel unfulfilled in their lives.
Yeah.
So we do actually have a strong tie between the episode in some way, or the two storylines.
Yeah.
I agree. It didn't hit.
Yeah.
So,
and then I think the actual
burning.
Lena burning, I don't think I liked it. And I feel like I kind of get it. Like, she talked about dying the dragon rider's death, but I don't feel like that's a dragon rider's death, right? I feel like that's like you're dying in battle sort of thing.
Which I think is what she means by dragon rider's death. Though.
Yeah. So I think being burned by Vhagar, like, looked cool. It was fun to see, like, close shots of Vhagar, but it just felt really weird to me that this person who was all about family and all about the lineage
wants to go die alone.
Well, was going to kill her and her child by burning alive, you know? It's weird. And I get that, like, Damon tried to save her. But it just, I don't know. I feel like they could have done a lot more to show that Damon also was not a good person in this. Like, he did have feelings for her, but, like, that turn at the end, like,
what do you mean? What turn?
Well, when the doctor's like, we could try to cut the baby out, he could have been like, okay, try it. Right?
I like his character growing, though. I liked him caring about Lena.
I get it. We just already established earlier on when they were meeting, the guy who was like, we need your dragons. He says, you have 3, maybe 4, right? In my mind, Damon's like, oh, that's another possible dragon. Let's get that baby out of there, you know? But even if not that, then make it about Lena being strong. She's like, I want to have my baby on Driftmark where I was born. And Damon's like, okay, we're leaving. And then her water breaks. So she has to stay. Right.
Yeah.
And she's like, I am
cooler.
not dying here. I'm going back to Driftmark. And then she dies in childbirth. Right.
Here's what I have like lots of thoughts.
Sure.
Okay. So 2 things. Lena in the books does not die that way. In the books, she gave birth to a malformed baby who dies. And then Lena dies days later. She attempts to fly Vhagar one last time, but died on the steps. Here's what I think I would have done. If I was a writer in that room, what I would have done is pretty much I think, combining your idea, I think she could have had to have given birth.
Yeah.
And it could have been a cut. There's a couple options. I think she should have gone and flown Vhagar one last time. That's a dragon rider's fucking death.
That's
right there.
what I'm thinking.
Go fly Vhagar one last time.
Yeah.
Get off Vhagar and die, and then Vhagar burns her.
For sure.
Like in a
That's
sad,
so much stronger.
Vhagar cries one last time and burns her and like lays her head down and is so sad about Lena dying. And Damon can see her flying. And like, he can be like, that's a Valerian. That is a, right? Like,
and
that is
that's
the
when
person.
He's like, I did love this woman. Like,
he could realize it. Yes. And I think we could have had Lena being like, no, we are going to Driftmark now. We're going to, and then her water breaks. She has to have the baby.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And then I just think we could have tied it all together and it could have really felt like Lena is this strong character and we still could have had that burning moment. But could you imagine seeing this, like her crawling? I even think we could have done what they did. She couldn't give birth. And so she decides, it could have been either she decides like, I know I'm dying, I'm going to ride Vhagar, or it could have been, the baby's not ready, I'm going to fly to Driftmark.
Yeah.
See, it could have been one of those things.
Exactly.
You could have picked. I think I like the one where she decides like, I'm dying, I'm going to ride Vhagar one last time. And I think Damon watching that image could have been so cool. And how cool it would have been to see this like pregnant woman claw her way up to Vhagar. And it's like, I'm going to do this.
Well, yeah, you're either going to play it like because you spent all this time. This is a great episode for her character, obviously, because she dies, right? It's the only one she's got. But I'm all about it. I'm like, yes, you're going to die at Dragon Riders. That's awesome. That's fucking awesome. So you either need to commit fully to doing that, or you need to have it savagely ripped away. And she does just die in childbirth.
And Damon can be so upset about it.
Exactly, right? But you can't just play the middle. Like, you're not going to go out and be like, burn me. That's not what you meant. That's not a Dragon Rider's death. Like, that's just weird. Yeah. You know? It
is weird because like, she doesn't say bye to her kids or anything. And I get it. She was like, I'm not going to let them do that to me. But would she really know that's what they were doing? I don't think so. I just think it was a half-baked idea that could have been so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. And you know what I hated? Can I say what I hated?
Absolutely.
This weird fucking triumphant music in the background was playing. It was like this big music, and I'm like, this is sad. Why are we like why are we in a battle? She's yelling, she's begging this dragon to burn her. She's begging. Like, she's on her fucking knees begging to be burnt, and y'all are like, yeah, she's a dragon rider. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know how they dropped the ball that hard. Like, it could have been so, because you know what it could have been? It could have paralleled the first. We really want a little story on its own. Yeah. Parallel the beginning then. Parallel the beginning around, where she's flying. Or you know what we could have done? Have them both fly
Damon could have gone up there and flown with her.
Shit.
And she could have done Dracarys again.
Oh,
where she did.
Fuck.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right in the beginning, she has Dracarys and Damon flies through it. Damon could have done that for her. Damon could have said Dracarys, his dragon does the fire, and she
Vhagar
rides through it.
Cries out. Yeah.
Yeah, as she dies and takes her final breath. That's a dragon rider's death.
That's how you do it.
I got chills. That was a really good idea.
What's a good idea?
Do you know how beautiful that would have been to see that?
Oh, how perfectly symmetrical the plot would have been.
How beginning, middle, end, beautiful little story on its own that would have been.
And it solidifies so much more because like all the scenes where they're talking in the thing, I'm not getting a ton that Damon cares. But like the only time I was like, Damon loves this girl was when they're riding dragons together.
Yes.
Because again, like that's their thing. That's what they do. So to go out that way, that's fucking genius.
She's got the dragon of dragons.
She's got the dragon. Absolutely.
Sad.
Damn.
Missed opportunity.
I didn't realize how bad it was until you said that.
Yeah, so then we have, after the weird triumphant music plays over her death, we have a transition to Rhaenyra holding her baby, and Harwin's basically saying goodbye to his boys, even though they're
who cares?
His boys.
Whatever.
I know, right? And he like is saying bye to them. He barely says bye to Rhaenyra because he can't really. And then they walk out, and Rhaenyra's like, "We'll write. He'll write to us." And Jace is like, "Is Harwin Strong my father? Am I a bastard?" And I don't know.
It's just,
I don't know. It's just, again, it's a short scene with no momentum. It's fine. It was
goes
just
nowhere. What does she even say? Does she answer?
She does.
What
this
does
is
she
maybe
say?
going to be my quote for the episode, but I'll say it now.
Oh, okay.
She says, "You are a Targaryen is all that matters."
Yeah.
It's just, again, it's a small scene. It was cool to see Jace knowing this, even though he's kind of a little boy, that even Rhaenyra was so sort of, maybe this needed to be earlier, and maybe this is what pushed Rhaenyra
or just
to.
alluded to earlier, maybe, right? Because again, like the only other scene that they've truly done well with layering is the Kristen versus Sir Harwin. So to boil it down to surface level, is he my father? You know, like.
Well, I also think it could have been a deciding factor because it's clearly, to me, with Jace, even understanding this, like a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And Rhaenyra being so blissfully unaware that everyone thinks it's fine. Nobody cares. Everyone thinks it's fine when everyone here believes that is not, those are bastard boys.
Yeah.
Even Jace sees it. I feel like that just makes Rhaenyra look very naive.
That's the tipping point for sure.
So instead, it happening now, I think, just makes her look kind of bad. But happening before could have helped her realize what to do.
Yeah.
So then we cut to Laenor sparring with Carl with a Q.
Yeah.
And Rhaenyra basically goes to speak to him and says, like, we are leaving Dragonstone. And says she's been undermined and whispered about. And she says, like, we should have left sooner. Mm-hmm. And I thought this was interesting because I asked myself, like, why didn't they leave sooner? That's an interesting question. And I was like, it's probably because Rhaenyra just loves her dad.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's truth to Laenor being like, well, you always said if you left, Alicent would just pour that.
Well,
honey
yeah,
all
that's
over.
what I was about to say. Okay. And then Laenor just answers right after.
Yeah.
What the question was. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was, again, this is another kind of poetic way to say this, is that she pours honey in his ear.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, again, this is something that could have been stated earlier, though. Like, because we've had an episode of her doing, like, we've seen it happen, right? So, like, the exposition of them explaining it to each other is a little unnecessary at this point.
Yeah, I think instead they told us and they could have showed us. We could have seen, they love to do the watching people. We could have seen Rhaenyra get angered by Alicent and Viserys speaking.
Yeah.
Or seeing them speaking, and that fuels her. If we would have felt like this whole episode was fueling her to leaving King's Landing, where she's been her whole life. I think that might have given the episode some more stakes. If every little thing felt like a drop in a bucket, and eventually this bucket is going to fill up and tip over to where she has to leave. And that could have been a show don't tell moment where she sees Alicent and Viserys speaking, and we could have seen it influence her decision.
Yeah.
I thought it was nice that she says, bring him. She says, we'll need every sword we can muster. So she knows. I don't feel like later on she begins to act like it. I feel like this was kind of odd because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly. But I don't think she feels like a war is coming.
Yeah.
Do you think she does?
I don't know. Yeah, I think she, I think right now it's very much like, I just want to protect my family. I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, I think Alicent is definitely more prepared than she is. I don't think Rhaenyra's thinking like, I'm going to have to vie for my spot. Like, I think she's still very
solidified in it.
You know? Yeah.
So then we cut to the assassins, I guess you'd call them, his bees. They're at Harrenhal. They're at Harrenhal, and they are burn
torch the place.
Yeah, they burn Harwin and Lionel, and then
which is cool.
Cut to this voiceover
again. In the after episode, they say, "Oh, there are 2 burnings this episode," and I was like,
"Isn't there 3?" Oh, you're saying? Oh, well, I meant 3 people die.
Oh yeah.
But you're
there's
saying
the burning at Harrenhal.
Yes.
Then there's Vhagar taking out Lena, and I'm like, why did you choose this independent project to
tie every parallel possible?
Like, come on, dog. Let's go.
So then we get to the voiceover, which we kind of talked about this, and he says, what are children but a weakness? And he continues monologuing while Viserys is crying and he's kissing a ring. He sees this rat, which I thought that was all kind of confusing and unclear.
Yeah.
And people are clearing out dead bodies from Harrenhal. Daemon and his daughters are like seeing the mom's death.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to Lair's looking at a flower and he's telling Alicent all of this. And I was like, oh, it's him talking about it.
Again, just like poorly placed, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm all about it. I'm all about a villain monologue.
Yeah, me
talking
too.
about how they're doing crazy shit
or just,
at the end of a Game of Thrones episode.
I like creativity.
Yeah.
And I do think like monologuing and over all these like montaging almost of scenes is cool.
For sure. You just need to put the monologue voice in a place first.
Yeah.
Like, even if they would have started that scene with them meeting, like in the room, and then he starts talking and then we cut. Like, I at least know where he is.
If you wanted to keep it a surprise, we could have just seen him with the flower. Yeah. And the reveal could have been he was talking to Alicent, maybe. Mm-hmm. And basically it just ends. He says that the place is cursed, so it won't seem suspicious. I like that they gave us that background on Harrenhal.
Yeah.
And Alicent is like, you pass judgment. And I thought that was interesting that she's so religious and she feels like and she says, I do not wish for this. And he says, well, you're going to reward me when the time is right. Which
is cool.
Yeah. I thought that was all nice dialogue to end the episode.
Yeah.
It just all could have been better. And I thought it was weird because, so why did we choose to jump to this episode? Why was the 10-year time jump here and not the next episode where they're at Dragonstone and where they're at? And my guess would be is that this was the prequel to Otto coming back.
Yeah.
But that means only one episode Otto was gone.
Yeah, well, it's just really tricky because this story spans so many years and so many times. And I do agree, like the stuff that happened in this episode, I feel is important enough to be in an episode.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's weird to jump 10 years for a filler episode, basically, you know?
Well, it sets up the Vhagar thing that, spoiler, is going to happen next episode with Vhagar. So I actually think it sets it up really well.
I do. I agree, yeah.
What's going to happen? And we meet some characters. Mm-hmm. And it's Rhaenyra leaving. So I guess unless we were going to use a stronger storytelling device and be more creative, it almost feels enough to have this episode be here.
Uh-huh. Well, it's weird because this episode is the end of the 10-year period of what's happened. And then we start the new period the next episode. You know, which like on paper makes sense. It's just weird.
It is weird. Because
we go through all these characters and changes in the dynamics, and then they change again. because they're in a new place and they're feeling different, But I don't know. Again, we've said this time and time again. That's just, it comes to the territory of adapting this. And I feel like they're doing their best. Like, it's hard,
I agree. It is hard. And it's like so close to being strong. Well, I mean, it's like, I see so much potential that it makes me sad.
Yeah. I'm almost wondering if a heavier rewrite where they do have time jumps, but we stay in times for a bit longer,
Yeah.
Like,
I
instead
agree.
of like with the younger actors, have that be the span of like a year instead of 2 years here, 9 months here, like, is there a way you could have condensed all that to be in one time period? So then there's like maybe the span of a year or two chronologically, then a big jump, and then the rest of it. That might have flown a little better.
I think so too.
I just don't know. Again, it's another issue that they do need to deal with adapting this, and it's been hit or miss.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been.
Yeah. Overall, I thought the episode was fine. Again, cutting issues. Dialogue, I thought overall was good. I like the poetic stuff we talked about.
I hope they keep doing it. I think it was really cool, actually.
I love those kids. They're so great. I like the not only them as like actors, but I think these characters coming into the story is very fun and is going to change a lot of things. It's just read like a history again, especially after the last couple episodes where they were so very character driven and everything was very like understandable. This was very much like reading the book. Then 2 days later, this person came and did this. And it's just disconnecting with the characters again, because I feel like they're just showing up to the place and doing the thing. What's in like theater when you're in a show, you need to think before the scene, what was your character doing before that?
The given circumstances is what it's called.
I feel like the writers didn't know what these characters were doing before they showed up on set to do the scenes,
Yeah.
Because we cut to them just doing the thing,
Yeah, I just
detached.
think when there's so much potential, I just wish I want to see good TV, and I know they want to produce good TV. So it's just so weird to me that again, it really just goes back to basics and then some creativity.
Yeah.
I think they're just they're being safe, maybe is what it is. Maybe they are too afraid to do something that sort of pushes boundaries. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I think I'm going to give a quote.
Fantastic.
And this one was hard. There was a lot of really quotable things in the episode.
Poetic.
And I still can't decide, to be honest. But okay, I'm going to go with this one. It's Lara Strong says this to Alicent.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Truth has many flavors, Your Grace." Which I thought was cool because it's like, whose truth are we telling? I mean,
That's
Alicent
good.
is not, she doesn't tell the truth. And there's times she literally lies in this episode.
That's good. Especially coming from the idea of history written by the winners.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I like that.
Yeah. And to come from Laris is interesting to me as well. Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you liked what you heard, supporting us by interacting in some way, either following, liking, subscribing based on what platform you're on, really helps the video/audio get heard by more people.
Yes. What was your favorite quote from the episode? This was a really quotable
My favorite
one.
quote? I liked a wise sailor leaves the storm as it gathers. I think that was my favorite for sure.
I'm in the audience.
Oh, my bad. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Oops, that's embarrassing.
Go ahead. Keep going.
That's it. I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been
Welcome to the Writer's Room.
See you next time.
Sorry? I was trying to get like a fun, like...
No, well, you just looked at me in the eyes and I was
Sorry.
like, oh, thanks so much for asking.
I'm so sorry. I was like,
No, it's okay.
then you answered and I was like, that's so sweet. I'm actually like really fucking tired. So I was trying to end it because you need to go to...
I'm so fucking tired.